my brain, something in my head had exploded. That's the last thing I remember. Something in my brain exploded. He said then the next thing he remembers is literally being pulled up to what he called heaven. People ask me every day, Jean, with everything that's going on in the world, what can I do? My answer, start growing your own food. It's the best investment for your future and the future of your family. Whether you live in an apartment or have your own land, our friends at Food Forest Abundance will guide you every step of the way. Book your free consultation right now, no strings attached. Just click the link down below and get started today. Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, and hitting the notifications button so you'll get notified about new videos as they are released. Today, I'd like to share a story with you, an NDE story, a near-death experience story that was told to us by a man many years ago when Christine and I were selling the house we were living in at the time. One day, I believe it was a Sunday, we received a call from our realtor, and he said that there was this guy who would like to come by today. It was possible. We said, sure, no problem. And about 2 hours later, the doorbell rang and, or the bell rang, and a man walked up to our front door. There was a gate, and walked up the driveway. And when I say walk, he was really struggling, paralyzed. Obviously, half of his body was paralyzed, and he had a hard time walking. And obviously had suffered a stroke, which you could see, pretty clearly if you understand how these things work. As we shook hands and exchanged names and pleasantries and whatnot, we both had the feeling this wasn't just about looking at our house. As it so often is, things happen for a reason and people are being brought together for a reason. So it wasn't long until he started sharing his story. He was a businessman from Bulgaria and was very successful, living the high life, and had spent a few weeks in Dubai, probably a year prior to seeing us. Just closed a very successful business deal. And he said, I was sitting on the beach in Dubai, smoking a fat cigar, having a drink, and living the high life, making a lot of money, and just feeling on top of the world. He had just had a young son with his wife, maybe a few months old at that time. And he said, I was sitting on the beach, and all of a sudden, it was as if my brain, something in my head had exploded. That's the last thing I remember. Something in my brain exploded. He said then the next thing he remembers is literally being pulled up to what he called heaven. And he said, like so many others have told their NDE stories, he was kind of observing everything from above. He was watching the scene on the beach as somebody had run up to him, a woman had run up to him, started doing CPR and calling the ambulance and trying to keep him alive. And he was observing the whole scene, and as he has ascended to this other world, his father greeted him. And it was a beautiful reunion for him because he had missed him dearly since his passing, he said. And so his father then slowly took him away from that scene and basically brought him into this other world, which Lyudmil, that was the man's name, he called it heaven. And he said it was incredibly beautiful. It looked similar as on earth, but everything was more ethereal, more intense colors. Everything was clean and beautiful, just absolutely wonderful. And he said to him it felt like, he was spending days or weeks there. He got to meet deceased family members, and he said he also had a conversation with God. And some things were revealed to him in that conversation. Some things were revealed to him by his father. And some things were even revealed to him about the person on the beach, the woman that had helped him, but I'll get to that later. So these principles that were revealed to him changed his outlook on life, even as he was still up in heaven. And of course, like all people explain or say it, they have a choice, right? When the time came, he was asked whether he wanted to stay or go back to Earth. At that point, he was lying in a hospital in Dubai on life support, intensive care, in a coma, and he was given the choice whether he wanted to go back or not. And he said he was really struggling with it because it was so beautiful, it was so wonderful where he was at. But at the same time, he had this very, very young son that had just been born that he loved very much. And so his father advised that he should go back and look out for his son and be a good role model for his son, because he hadn't really lived a very role model worthy life until that point. So he decided to come back and came back into his body and suffered through the recovery process, which was very difficult. But he also said at the same time, there was a kind of an energy and a peace that he had brought with him through this experience. Now, I mentioned earlier that he had a very, very interesting conversation in heaven, which had led him to actually meet the person who had helped him on the beach. And here's what happened. The lady on the beach that had helped him, coincidentally, was a doctor. He didn't know any of that. He also didn't know the woman's name, and nobody else knew the woman's name, because as soon as the ambulance arrived, she went about her way. But while he was in heaven, he met that lady's brother who had died. And the brother had something he wanted to share with his sister that he didn't before he passed away. So he passed this message on to Ludmilla in heaven before he came back and said, this is her name, this is where she lives, you can find her and look her up. And so that's what he did. After he, went through recovery and rehabilitation and felt better, he found that lady that had helped him on the beach in London where she lived. And so he met up with her. Actually met up with her in London, and she was absolutely shocked because she couldn't believe how he could have found her. She didn't give her name to anyone. She didn't tell anyone who she was. She just did what probably anyone would have done. She helped. And so he passed on the message from her deceased brother. And a greater cycle closed and a greater circle closed. As is this so often, nothing happens without a reason. But why am I telling you this story? It's one of those beautiful NDE stories. And even though he was struggling as he was walking through the house and looking at our house, planning to buy it, there was no sense of depression over his physical condition. There was no sense of sadness over that. There was pure life force and joy in it. But he said that he came back to lead a different life, to be more of service. But he had also received some clarity on spiritual principles that he said was very important. He said that God had told him, yes, we are here to serve. Yes, we are here to help each other and help others, but not to a fault. And this is something where it becomes very timely and why I wanted to share this story. So many people have this deep desire to help someone they love or even strangers, to the point where they sacrifice their own well-being, they sacrifice their own health. They go so much above and beyond that they themselves lose health, lose joy, lose well-being. And he explained this to us as he was walking through our house very clearly. He said, here's an example. Because he was a businessman, and in earlier endeavors, he had gone to trade shows and fairs and whatnot. And so he gave a very clear example. He said, imagine you are setting up your booth at a trade show because you're presenting your product. And he said, now you came early enough to set it all up. You brought your tools and you're there preparing everything because opening's an hour away. And so all of a sudden, one of your neighbors at that trade show or fair comes up to you and says, hey man, I forgot my tools and can I borrow yours so I'll get ready in time? And he said, if lending that man the tools would mean that you yourself wouldn't be able to get ready in time and prepared for what you came to do, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't sacrifice your own opportunities and your own well-being for that other person because they did not take full responsibility, didn't prepare properly, and didn't take the necessary actions. And I remember walking with that thought for a very, very long time because I thought it was very, very important. As we are walking through this life and trying to help others, we so often have no boundaries. We so often have no clear lines in the sand as to at what point is it enough? At what point would helping the other person help that person, but to my own detriment? And that's something Christine and I have clearly decided a long time ago we're not going to do. We're not going to put ourselves in a horrible position to help someone who didn't do what they could to help themselves. And this is really a principle that he brought back from this near-death experience, from what he called heaven. He said, what I came back to share and lead by as a role model, an example also for my son, is that we have to take responsibility for our own actions, and that those who don't want to do that, well, they need to live with the consequences of that. We cannot interfere with that. And this is what I believe is also so very important as we're going through these times of this great awakening, to draw that line in the sand. People have made very bad choices. And they made very, very bad choices because they were scared, or they made bad choices because they were lazy or complacent, or because they didn't want to rock the boat, or because it's how it was always done. It doesn't really matter what the decision-making process was about. If we try to interfere with that, or try to take responsibility for other people and their choices and the consequences of their choices, we lose ourselves. And what we came here for is, to a large part, our own spiritual evolution and development. Because all of life is a development and an evolution. And if we get distracted and pulled away from that too much, well, then we can't do that. And this is not how it was meant to be. So this has nothing to do with egotism. It has to do with a very healthy and affirmative choice to accept your own responsibility and other people's responsibilities. Now, this man was such a beautiful teacher to us, because he was not a holy prophet coming with a white robe and a halo above his head. Not at all. He was clearly someone who had lived a full life, and who had done all the worldly things of drinking and smoking and partying and women and everything, that a lot of people did, and was so humble and so positive and so inspiring as he shared his stories. And we talked for a while and kept in touch for a while. He never ended up buying the house, which was totally fine, because we knew that's not what this experience was about. And there was another point that I wanted to make here, is that so many of our teachers do not come in the way, shape, or form that you would expect them, right? We have a very clear societal and programmed vision of what teachers look like. Spiritual teachers have to look a certain way. Teachers in the educational world have to look a certain way. That's all programmed. But the greatest teachings and so much of the wisdom that we were lucky or blessed enough to receive came from people that did not look like those holy teachers. They were very down-to-earth, I don't want to sound condescending, but average Joe kind of people. There was nothing average about them. They were very special if you cared to look deep enough and listen. That was a story I wanted to share with you today. I know there was a reason. I know you needed to hear this. There was a reason why you needed to hear this, or it wouldn't have come up. And this is how we do things around here. It's very synchronistic. It's very guided. It's very intuitive. And that's how it's going to continue to be. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back with you again very, very soon. Would you like to get access to exclusive content, as well as being part of a community of like-minded people posting, sharing, and connecting on a deeper level? Come join the Inspired community on Locals, where we share more intimately and privately, and do our Coffee and Truth live streams, as well as our Honey Talks show, the only Inspired show with Christine Nolan. The Inspired community is absolutely uncensored and unfiltered, a place for truth, authenticity, and freedom. Join us now at inspired.locals.com or click on a link in the video description.